No,
No.
no, it's 5:59.
5:59, okay.
Now it's 6.
Okay, let's see, everybody, where's Wes, is he? He's supposed to stay, he's got to do a presentation. He's got to stay for a presentation. Is everybody, staff ready? Are we ready to go?
Yes, we are ready to go.
Okay. Welcome to the July 11th, 2023 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board meeting. And I asked everybody, I'll call this meeting to order and pledge of allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item of business is public comment. If anyone wishes to address the Board of Manager, an item not on the agenda or on the consent agenda, please come forward at this time. I'm not seeing anybody.
I feel pretty comfortable based on.
I think we're going to move on to the next item of business. That's the approval of the agenda. Is there any additions, corrections, deletions from staff? Anything from the Board of Managers? If not, after I wish to have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second?
Motion made and approved by Manager Morkenberg and Manager Burnett. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so we're going to go to programs and project update from staff, and I think we're going to have a really good update. Right?
Yes, we are. All right, July 11th. I'm going to start us off with a little precursor to lake levels with an acknowledgement to our drought status. As we probably have all noticed, we're looking similar to last year, and that is confirmed with the drought monitor. This is a national index here, and it shows that we are in a moderate drought category, and circled in the bottom red circle, we are in this D1 through D4 classification. We are 95.9% through this moderate drought category and are approaching severe drought. So that is where we're at. This was of July 6th, or July 4th. I believe we're approaching or very close to this severe drought category. Looking at last year's information, almost identical with the percentages that we're seeing toward severe drought. So this mirrors last year's information on precipitation and drought status. One thing to note is if you're looking at 2023 data, we were in a 0% drought at the end of May. So we have really had a lack of precipitation that's driving this. And that has led to a decline in lake levels. Prior Lake, as of yesterday, was at 900.94. That is down 0.76 feet from last month's board meeting. And Spring Lake is at 710.31. Logger is en route, so that'll get set up and we'll have that displaying information in the next couple weeks. Fish Lake is at 946.06, which is about 3/4 of a foot below the outlet weir. We're seeing this in low water levels in all our streams and other lakes. So just side information here. The June precipitation measured 1.45 inches, 1.54 inches. which is really quite less than the rate of evaporation, or how do I put this? It does not allow for an increase in water level as the rate of evaporation and other outputs is far greater than what is coming in the lake. So 9.12 inches decline in Prior Lake. This low water has really slowed down carp activity. In kind of mid-June, we got out once with small success. But as far as the carp management program goes, we're submitting an article to the Scott County Scene on our backpack electrofishing unit and how we're adapting to the conditions. We're also have planned to install a new carp trap in Spring Lake. This one's going to be coined the hog trap. We're using feral hog trap type technology to try and capture and remove carp. Feral hogs are a terrestrial invasive, and we're, down in the southern and central part of the U.S., and even really across North America, they're a huge issue. And, well, why can't we use their technology? So we'll be installing some gates and other technologies that will hopefully cross use and provide results. Hoping for an August update on this. If nothing else, we're really cutting some innovative ideas here and trying to apply other people's research to our goals. We got out into the Prior Lake Outlet Channel to perform maintenance that was highlighted and recommended in the 2022 maintenance or report on bank stabilization and vegetation maintenance. So we cut and removed trees and other logs that were in clearly identified as impacting bank stability and flow. So this section was in segment 1 near Jeffers Pond. So we've got another day followed up in July for round 2 of tree jamming is what we're calling it. And today's monitoring minute is going to be on how loading estimates are formed using field collected data. The idea behind this is just to give the board of managers and the public kind of a high level sense on how field collected data is really boiled down to how it's used, and sometimes it's a lot of effort to get a single number. So I'm going to try and explain how do we know what to plan for during, the idea is to provide information for project development. How do we determine the amount of nutrients flowing through our streams, and how does the staff here help provide project inputs? And this is done through stream gauging, chemistry analysis, calculations, and modeling, and really providing inputs to our engineer and for public understanding. So one of the big parts of the monitoring program is stream gauging. We install equipment into the streams and lakes that record water level continuously. We then calibrate this equipment to a known elevation, and it provides accuracy to this continuous level. That elevation that we calibrate it to is then used to define the stage, which is the height in water level. We routinely check these benchmarks to the water level to ensure accuracy of our equipment. So in the photo, you see me checking that there's a post, and then I'm checking with a tape measure. That post is then surveyed with a GPS unit, and I can then relate that tape measurement to a check mark on this graph seen in those red dots. So this is the graph that's just monitoring the water level throughout the season of 2021. So at these stream sites, we also then collect flow measurements. These flow measurements are using an acoustic Doppler type sensor. They measure the stream cross section, and they detect the velocity at which the water is moving. And then from that, we can determine flow or discharge. And for example, that's collected in cubic feet per second. So this equipment we use creates outputs that can show us how accurate this data was collected and create calculations that are quite accurate and easy to get to. In addition to those, we collect chemistry samples. Both stream and lake sampling is done bi-weekly, and typically we would collect total phosphorus, soluble reactive phosphorus, total nitrogen, total suspended solids, chlorophyll A, and chlorides. There are additional nutrients that we collect when there's, of particular interest. For example, E. coli. So these biweekly samples are then depicted in the red dots on the graph in the bottom left. We then use all this information to build a rating curve. Within the streams, we can plot all those calculated measurements, and then we can apply an algebraic style curve equation to that, and then plug in all those continuous water level measurements into this equation to then give us a continuous discharge. This is then used, so all these equations and all these inputs can then be put together to tell us how many pounds or weight of volume of a nutrient flows through a particular monitoring site throughout that season. So all that biweekly work is then boiled down to can be boiled down to a single number. For example, this output was created in 2018 using a U.S. Army Corps engineer modeling program called Flux. This is something that our engineering firm has used and can use, and it can create simplified outputs of how many pounds of nutrients, for example, total phosphorus, flow into and out of particular systems. So to kind of, yes, Christian.
Yeah, so my question is, if we go back to the previous slide, so if we look at what runs into Spring Lake under CD2 and CD3, you can see how the total phosphorus goes up from 1,700 to 3,300, and then it drops down to 2,500. The drop there to 2,500, is that after the iron chloride plant?
Correct.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. And you'll see that in both even more significantly in the dissolved phosphorus and total suspended solids. So that would be an example of project effectiveness. And to wrap this up, this data use is used to identify priority locations, to detect trends, to build TMDLs, provide inputs for models, aiding project design, selecting treatment methods, project scale, project effectiveness, and then creating landowner and public support in these projects. So just a highlight of kind of how the program can boil down into simplified measurements and uses.
Okay, great. So the past several months, I've been selecting a few projects to highlight with active updates. I think it's a good place in a short agenda and halfway through the year to just run through all of them and give you a status update on where the projects are. So we'll be touching on all of them, and feel free to ask questions throughout. The first to update on, which has been relatively low maintenance almost completely low maintenance in recent months, is the Sutton Lake Management Plan. So where we left that lake management plan, it was approved by the board, and the major findings in that plan were that lake drawdown could be used as a tool for promoting plant diversity, which was one of the goals in the plan. And that cattail management could be challenging. And you'll see there it lists out the different methods that are often used for cattail management and the challenges that this lake presents. In the blue, I've highlighted kind of what our near-term action is coming from this plan, and that's to monitor how drawdown affects the plant diversity. Because we're having natural drought, we get to see what would happen if we used our outlet and drew down the lake. We don't have to use the outlet. Nature is doing it for us. So we have an aerial drone footage and vegetation survey from 2022 that can be used as our year zero. Often the way that kind of analysis happens and is monitored is over the span of 5 to 20 years is when the time scale you'll see effects from drawdown. The first 5 to 10 probably being the most potent. So we have scheduled or plan to schedule point intercept surveys to identify how the plant's dynamics have changed in 2025 and 2028 again. And then to conduct annual drone surveys as we can. That first survey was done in fall, so if we can continue that trend and continue to do fall drone surveys, that'll allow us to kind of compare and see how plant makeup is changing with drawdown. So right now, not a ton of active management, but more observation. Another project in the Sutton Lake area is iron enhanced sand filter. I won't be too long on this slide because it was covered in last meeting, but there was a feasibility study conducted for one site close to the outlet. Some landowner concerns have prohibited that from moving forward to completion. So for that and reasons of looking at is it the most effective site, we've identified 2 other potential areas near these question marks, at least 2, that we could evaluate to see if they are feasible alternatives or beneficial alternatives even. So Carl is still conducting that initial analysis, and we hope to have more at next month's meeting. The Spring West Iron Enhanced Sand Filter project is located in an area that is overlapped with a roadway realignment study that the county is doing. So I've been working with the county to understand how that will look, and obviously if they are planning to take some of that land along the road, that would impact potentially the sites that we had identified for an iron enhanced sand filter, and would be hard to move forward without that information. So I'm trying to understand what more likely outcomes are in partnership with the county and see if there can be some beneficial land swaps. Just this table at the bottom is a reminder that there were 8 different options prepared for that site. So there are options, some more cost effective than others related to just site constraints and what would be required for pumping and such. So this project is still in the works and understanding which option will be feasible from a land perspective. The Spring West wetland enhancement, the other portion of that feasibility study, identified 2 properties that a wetland enhancement or wetland bank could occur on. That property was involved in a comprehensive plan amendment request, which has since been denied. And so it's really, I need to re-engage with that landowner and reassess whether they'd be open to looking at this as an option for their property. Previous to that determination on the amendment request, the landowner had expressed preference to developing the property. So we'll see where that conversation goes. The Buck East wetland is really waiting for landowner response, and I continue to follow up and get that information in a way that can engage the landowner in a way that might be interesting to them. So the ferric chloride system assessment is up and running. We had a site visit with the consultants and sub-consultants in June, and that went really well. I felt very confident in the expertise that were being brought by the team. It was amazing to just hear people who are really well versed in the topics at hand. So very confident that that will come out of this study with some well-informed information. There's several tasks here in this scope. One of them is a task 3 at minimum functional system update. So that's meant to identify things that we need to replace to continue the functioning of the system in a minimal way, not necessarily improving. So that minimum system update, what would be required for that is estimated to be a rough number prepared for the August draft budget. As Joni mentioned, the draft budget you saw today has a placeholder, and so we're hoping to refine that with some more informed numbers. The Swamp Iron Enhanced Sand Filter project has had a lot of great movement. I had several initial landowner meetings to understand what their interests would be, how they use their land, and we also held a initial meeting with agencies and regulatory governing bodies that would overlap with the project concept. So Sand Creek Township, Scott County, the Ditch Authority, Scott Soil and Water manages that ditch authority for them, and DNR was present. Also had a separate meeting with Army Corps of Engineers. So really comprehensive feedback for what permitting hurdles we could come up against. Overall, really favorable reception to the water quality improvement aspect, likely iron enhanced sand filter. You can see the initial project concept here at the bottom. Just because of the base flow that was seen in the channel, it was recommended that there was a small bioretention pond before entering into the iron enhanced sand filter. So that's what you see in these little raindrop type section here is the additional area for that settling out. So that was really good to receive that feedback. There will need to be some work done to understand how to get the water out of the channel and into this filter that is permittable through the ditch authority. So we're still working through that, still very initial phases. Yep, Bruce, do you have a question?
Yeah, I know Stantec is doing this work,
Yep.
right? So are we looking at, a preliminary concept and then meet with the landowner and get an agreement and then finish the feasibility study, or what's the process?
So this sketch was showed to the landowner at the last meeting. We've been meeting with them regularly and asking for feedback. So I think we haven't gotten a no, and there's no agreement signed either. So
Yeah.
we've expressed that our interest is design in tandem with something that they could see themselves approving.
Okay.
Yep, Christian?
May I piggyback?
Yeah,
What
go
you're
ahead.
saying? I see about four projects at least, and I suppose one might argue all of our projects are somewhat determined by the landowner's input. Makes sense to, I think, everybody.
Right.
Is there a point at which, though, that the staff kind of goes, we're just not making any progress, and we have the money, and time is ticking, and when do we move away? Hey, it's a great project, we got to move on to something where we know we can make some progress. Is there anything you can put your hand on that says, yeah, this is when I know we got to move?
I think that's what we're doing in the Sutton Iron Enhanced Sand Filter right now, because one of the sites, we have a feasibility study completed. The district has invested money in completing that. But there may be some interest of a landowner that we can't meet or will add
Sure.
to that construction estimate. So our alternatives analysis will help us decide, is that still the best option? Is it on hold? Give us better information to make that decision here.
Thank you.
Yes,
Christian,
sir.
go ahead.
Yes, so I think that's exactly right, that the approach you're doing with Swamp Lake is to get very good feedback from the landowners, but also meeting with the agencies up front and getting a lot of good feedback there before we go into a feasibility study. And I think that's exactly right, to do a thorough pre-work before we go into doing expensive work. So I just want to compliment you on doing that.
Thank you.
Not easy, but very
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it is very good because the second part of this slide is, so water quality is one benefit of this project, and the board was interested in seeing whether we could add flood storage while we're looking at the outlet function for the iron enhanced sand filter. Can we store some more water as a secondary benefit in Swamp Lake? Based on initial feedback from DNR, it would be challenging for them to support from a Fish and Wildlife stance. Some other complications that make that element potentially not have as good of a cost-benefit ratio is that we would need to do a floodplain study. We don't have a good floodplain model to use there. That's a data gap. So to get that approved through people, we need to be able to show how much bounce there would be in a 100-year flood, and we just don't have that data available to us. What we have is pretty coarse. We don't know that it would be approved. So Stantec is looking into what data we do have, what the cost of getting what we would need is. Another hurdle that would need to be crossed or another thing to consider in evaluating flood storage as a project benefit is that when looking at the floodplain of this area, it was found that Swamp Lake, when it gets to a certain elevation, actually drains out of our watershed. And so in modeling the benefit of flood storage, it may have a less benefit than we had originally modeled with that additional piece of information. So Stantec is working on updating that modeling and giving us new information so we can assess whether it's worth it to us or not.
Another question, Emily. Do you know how much area we're looking at there in this drawing with Swamp Lake? I mean, I'm assuming we'd have to purchase it, or?
I don't know the acreage of Swamp Lake on the top of my head, but I can look into that.
Okay. I was just curious how big it is.
Mm-hmm. We would have to get agreements from all the landowners that abut the lake, at the very least.
How many landowners are involved?
I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, relatively few for a lake. It's 6 or 7. Okay, so lots of updates on this project. We should have a draft feasibility study in late fall, and Stantec should have some concepts and cost estimates for alternatives in earlier fall for the board to consider, and the landowners and other agencies too. So another project being supported by watershed-based implementation funding and Spring Lake Township is the Fish Lake Management Plan update. So this is currently in this, you received a update at the last meeting of where this is. We're still completing the analysis and the draft plan. That draft plan will be reviewed and commented on in fall public meetings. So we're kind of in the second phase of this plan. The first was kind of information gathering and giving a general primer to different public groups. And the second fall set of meetings will be more presenting our findings and asking for feedback on suggested actions. So that'll happen starting October, and then hopefully a December final plan review. And just to give you a review of what data seems to be suggesting, that analysis isn't completed, but the timing of the algal blooms that we're seeing and when we're seeing high phosphorus levels in the lake seems to suggest that internal loading is really driving water quality issues in Fish Lake. So these are, I'm just really simple, high level reviewing what we saw in last months, but these are pictures of algal blooms that right after ice out, you can see the ice on the lake on the right, and then early spring on the left. Those are both algal blooms, and that would occur due to internal loading when the water at the bottom of the lake is really phosphorus rich, and in the spring it turns over. Once the ice is gone, all the phosphorus that has just been brought to the top has access to sun, and you get these early and late, early spring, late fall blooms, which are not characteristic. Most often we see algal blooms in the summer when it's hot and sunny. So that's a big suggester. Another piece of data we saw last time, but it was in a lot of other information, so I just wanted to pull it to the top, is where we're seeing our hottest phosphorus. On the left, these are phosphorus measurements taken from the lake bottom. And you can see, I mean, this is an outlier, but highest total phosphorus is around 1,200 micrograms per liter, and much higher, even not outliers, they're around 600. Where if you look at the phosphorus measurements on the graph to the right, which is from the surface, water at the surface, that's around 160 is our highest outlier, and closer to 60 micrograms per liter. So we're talking about adding another 0 to those numbers, and pretty clear where the really hot nutrient loading is coming from. Another thing that seems to suggest internal loading is that we do take district measurements of, as Jeff mentioned, phosphorus on streams. So we do monitor inflow streams to Fish Lake. On the right, you see those measurements of total phosphorus coming in, and as you would expect in the summer seasons when people are fertilizing their lawns, crop fields are being managed, July, August, that's when the highest phosphorus is being seen in those creeks. It's not, there is a quantity of phosphorus there. That does contribute to the overall phosphorus budget of the lake. But when you look at this graph on the left, which is our average phosphorus for the lake over the year. Our high points in Fish Lake are happening in that early season and the late April and October, which matches again when that lake bottom phosphorus is coming up and getting re-exposed. So this is really just suggesting that we're likely looking at internal loading for a driver of water quality. So just wanted to pull some of those important indicators to the top again. Another project to touch on is Prior Lake outlet piping. As you're all aware, we submitted a request for capital funding for $2 million. We're aiming to construct in winter 2024, 2025, hopefully with successful award of that capital funding. And one of the benefits of applying for capital funding is that we would be eligible for being selected on or being part of a bonding tour. So our goals in immediate project management is to have our bid documents, quote unquote, construction ready or 95% of the way there by the time a legislative bonding tour would happen. WSB is our consultants on this project, and they've indicated that that's feasible, and that'll just really indicate that the district is invested and ready to act on this. And just wanted to put a point in there that this pipelining is being pursued because it allows us to get water out of the lakes faster and has, in modeling, demonstrates the single most effective flood mitigation option. So good progress on this project.
Yes, so I agree. It's definitely a high priority, and as you say, it's the single most effective flood mitigation option, and I would say it's a critical structure. Like, it's extremely important. Mm-hmm. So, I had a question for you, Jeff. I know you have done calculation for the PLOC group, and I was just wondering. I heard out in New York that they had like a 7-inch rainfall over a very short time. And I wonder if we have done calculations, if we get a similar, like 7-inch rainfall, what would happen to our lakes, and in particular Prior Lake here?
I could probably refer to Carl on this in that he was here during 2014, and there was, 14 inches of rain, or I don't know how many. But at this point, I would probably say that we could use 7 inches of rain, and we would be perfectly fine for the for the long term. But short term, it would be chaotic. But I think we could use that amount now.
If you get 7 inches over a month, it's wonderful. If you get 7 inches over 3 days, it's not so good.
Right.
It could be a problem. So, but
Yeah, I guess I would just add that there's so many variables into the timing and antecedent moisture conditions and what the lake level is at and everything. But the 7 inches is, if it was to happen in a short duration, in like a 24-hour period, that's approaching what is your 100-year event. And the lake is at 901 right now. I think 900. So, most of the flood elevation of the lake, 908 FEMA, assumes the starting water is at like 902.5. So you got 6.5 feet there. So take another 2.5 feet off that, maybe 906, if literally. But I don't think you'd actually realize that because of just how dry it is. It'd probably be half that much bounce, so maybe 3 feet of bounce or something, if you literally got 7 inches in less than 24 hours. But again, that's pretty not hard science, but just looking at the rules of thumb and all the various models that are out there.
and that what you're talking about here is Prior Lake. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and I know there's a difference. If you look at Spring Lake peaks faster, and goes down faster, and Prior Lake goes up slower and, falls slower. So I don't know if you could speculate, would Spring Lake also be safe currently?
The level of the Spring Lake right now is it outflowing at all?
No, it's 910. It's not outflowing.
Okay.
And there's probably about a foot of vertical storage, maybe less.
So that storage would probably be, in this theoretical case, with the lake about a foot below its outlet and a 7-inch rain in 12 hours, you would probably not approach the 100-year elevation, and that's 90. Help me out here. I'm forgetting that one. 904, and that doesn't sound right either.
No, like
911.
913 or 914.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So it wouldn't. I don't think it would even approach that. But again, a 7-inch rainfall is approaching what is the quote-unquote 100-year rainfall depth in 24 hours. So yeah, maybe a foot less than that elevation, the modeled 100-year elevation.
Next kind of group of projects to update on is there have been several other flood storage projects that we have identified and to start looking at. The project number 1 have had initial conversations, mixed reception from different landowners, continuing to do follow-up to work with landowners where they're at and provide some information that the district can help to clarify their land management situations. So working on that actively, have had meetings this morning to get that information and continue to do that. Project 5, I just heard back before the workshop that we did have initial conversation with a key landowner, Scott Soil and Water. We need to have additional conversations. There are some other landowners that overlap Project 5, and we did hear some concerns back from that key landowner. So we would need to address those, being one concern is access and just being near to their home, and another is the price that the district is willing to offer. So we'll continue having those conversations and come back with more information as I have it. But good willingness to meet on both of those projects. And then Project 6 has had less interaction with the landowner, but I hope to reach them at an event in August, which we are both attending. So those are all at different stages. Had some other projects and work that have popped up with Soil and Water Partnership, and so I just kind of lumped them together in this slide, but one is just wanted to update that there will be a farmer-led council meeting week of August 14th, likely August 15th. We have identified a potential project which was in the draft 2024 budget for stream restoration. There's some bank erosion and contributing phosphorus and sediment to Buck Lake and then Spring Lake. That stream restoration is identified in our upper watershed blueprint, so we've been working with Soil and Water to do some initial surveying, which is necessary to determine how much construction is needed and what's the scope of the project. So we'll have more information on that once the LiDAR is released and better project estimates for how that could go forward, but so far seems like landowners may be interested. Also just really wanted to mention that the partnership on project outreach, especially the flood storage projects, has been really invaluable, carried us a lot farther into conversations than I think we would have as a lone entity just with existing relationships and trust. So really important partnership to work through. And then lastly, I wanted to acknowledge that at the last meeting, the board approved a project for a pollinator and rain garden project that had 0 other contributions listed. And so I'm working to improve the way that we report those contributions. I'm understanding them myself and how that reporting works. To give you a short summary, rain garden and pollinator projects are funded just on a paid-by-scale basis. So the district has agreed to pay a dollar amount per acreage for each of those type of practices. And the landowner, it's not based on percentage of total cost like it would be with other cost share, like cover crop. We cover a certain percentage, and then the landowner is on the hook for the other. Rain garden and pollinator are just base costs that we agree to cover. The landowner contribution is expected to be much more than our base costs, and so I'm working with Soil and Water to identify and estimate so that we can show that there is landowner contribution and investment in those properties and projects. So that's one area that we've probably been underestimating the value that we're getting out of our projects and community cost sharing. And then another that I'll be reporting on is just that in our project cost share prioritization meetings, there have been several projects where Soil and Water and myself have decided to leverage their other funding to accomplish projects that benefit water quality within the watershed district, so we can save our cost share dollars to go farther. So I want to acknowledge that that work is happening and benefiting the district, even though we're not contributing any money. So we're just working out how to make sure that that reporting happens to you. So one example that you'll see reported in the future is there's a shoreline restoration project happening, I believe, on Prior Lake. So that we didn't have to fund at all because they had clean water funding. So just another example of really great partnership and balancing funds to make sure that we can do the most projects with what's available. And that's all of the projects.
Oh, very good. I thought it would be important to update the board on all the projects that are going on. There are a lot of stuff behind the scenes, so you can see the magnitude that Emily and Joni and staff are working on to get these projects going. So, and I think we're going to try and do this maybe every 4 months or 5 months or something like that to keep us informed. So is there any questions that anybody might have?
Did we cover carp management? Was it there and I missed it?
Yeah, I sort of breezed past that. But
He did have a slide
Did he?
on. Yeah, he
there
had a
was a
slide.
slide.
Sorry.
But I do have,
The
a
hog
piece
trap.
of information to add onto
Oh, the hog
onto that. And there was a question about how the district focuses efforts and how we choose which lakes to put more management effort into or not. So we do manage carp, and we have the capability and permitting authority to manage carp in all district lakes. How we determine this is there are multiple lakes with higher focus, and we select these priority lakes based on populations that have been determined to be detrimental. Some of these lakes have been identified in pre-existing reports, like our Spring Lake and Upper Prior Lake TMDL. Those are really our primary management lakes because they've been identified as having populations that are degrading to the water quality. What's kind of interesting about this particular watershed is that so many of these lakes are connected, and those connections, we can say that we remove carp in Arctic Lake, but it's really helping remove carp in Upper Prior Lake. So that's our focus then, just kind of spider webs out into where carp then lead us, which is often these interconnected systems. But to answer your question, it's Upper Pryor and Spring are priority, and then I would say Arctic is second to that. Pike, the outlet channel, Lower Pryor, and Fish. So
Very good, thank you.
I just had one question, like this PowerPoint that you do for us, is that available on the website then? Or can you send it to board managers?
certainly can send that.
Yeah. And Frank, you'll be able to see that slide on the hog trap.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I want you to miss that. Okay, any other questions from anybody? Christian, do you have it?
Yeah, so Jeff, I just want to thank you for your presentation also where you go through, where you showed like the monitoring concept and how it's used. And I think that's important for us to understand is why are we funding it and what we're using it for and how is it used in projects. So thank you for taking time to do it. You know, it was good. And to Emily, I just want to thank you for, in a very short amount of time, to be able to dive into all these projects and really work on them. And it's just very good to see, so keep it up.
Okay, thank you, guys. Appreciate it. I think we're going to move on to item 4.2 now. And this is a Spring Lake Association Need to Know Information side of brochure. And I think Administrator Geesey, you're going to take the lead on this.
Certainly, President Loney and managers. Spring Lake Association is in the process of developing, I'll call it a brochure, or it could be also called the lake map. That is a document that is going to have a map of Spring Lake on one side of it and some need-to-know information on the back side of the document. So once again, probably some sort of a map comparable to what is being displayed on one side, and then some additional information, need-to-know information on the back side of the document. Some of these need-to-know components are information on boating etiquette, some summaries of lake regulations, and also some contact information for various organizations and agencies, of which Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District is one of those agencies reflected. At the March, I believe, workshop, the managers adopted a motion to the effect that Prior Lake Spring Lake will continue to monitor research findings associated with powerboat activity in relation to lake health. Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District is supportive of preparing an educational piece on the topic of how powerboat operations can reduce impacts to lake health. And staff believes that some of the content that is included in the Spring Lake Association brochure does meet some of the intent of the Board of Managers motion. But with the placement of the Watershed District name on the brochure, staff does believe that it's important that board have the opportunity to review the content of the brochure to make sure the managers are comfortable with that content, as our name will be associated with it, and make sure that they are comfortable with that before we authorize the name to be placed on the brochure. I will also say that Spring Lake Association has been very accommodating. We did ask that they also include some information about preventing AIS in terms of the DNR protocol about cleaning your boat from AIS, draining water out of boats, and disposing of trash, which is also, once again, important boating activity as it relates to lake health. We also do have the president of Spring Lake Association, Wes Steffen, with us this evening. And Wes, if you would want to provide any additional information for the board, you're welcome to step up and provide some additional insight.
Welcome, Wes.
Managers, President, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you about what we're trying to do on with the Spring Lake Association. This kind of came about, first off, we've always had a map for Spring Lake, and it's been there ever since I've been a resident on the lake. One of the first things we did about 3 years ago was to include more information tied to personal watercraft and put it on the need-to-know information on the backside, because we had a lot of complaints from people using personal watercrafts and not using them in an appropriate manner. With the information that came up recently tied to wake boats and what have you, we have the opportunity to have 2 of our board members that have wake boats. And they had an opportunity to review the information, especially some of the recommendations that the CAC had put forth. And they gave us an additional side to the whole issue in regards to how the wake boats should be properly used on Spring Lake. And the first thing being that to get the best wake, you don't wake near shore. You go to the center of the lake where the lake's the deepest, and you always boat in the center of the lake. So what we tried to do here with this information was to balance what the DNR had been presenting and what some wake boat users had been talking about, and some of the information that had been put forth from an educational perspective. Lake Minnetonka recently put an ordinance in place for 300 feet away from shore, boats, and other activities. That is not supported by the DNR at this point. In fact, the letter that the Scott County Sheriff's Department put out used the term 200 feet as a recommendation, not law. So in the process of compromising and putting forth language tied to the use of what we call wake-related activities, because it's not just wake boats that create wakes. You have people with pulling tubers. They like to pull tubers, go in circles. They can create some pretty big wakes with those as well. So if you look at the information on Own Your Wake, this is one of the key pieces of the educational piece we were trying to put together here. We talk about it's recommended to keep a minimum distance of 200 feet from shore, which is supported by the Sheriff's Department. And then for water-related activities, which create large wakes, boat in the center of the lake and in water depths greater than 15 feet. And then we also reference the fact that if you go back to the map that Joni showed earlier, the DNR has provided us depths of Spring Lake. And if you see where the 15-foot circle is on Spring, it's more towards the center of the lake than it is towards the shore and what have you. These are the recommendations that we put forth for Spring Lake. I've shared this with the president of Prior Lake, but I think Prior Lake has some additional challenges relative to the way the lake is shaped and the way it's formed, and also the depths of that lake. Upper Prior Lake, if you look at the depth of that lake, upper is about the deepest portion of that lake is about 15 feet. And doesn't leave you much opportunity to do any sort of what would be called recommended wake boating activities. The bottom thing is, or the last thing I'll probably point out is, if you go back to the brochure, Joni, you know, Spring Lake is a recreational lake, and everyone has a right, which allows for a wide variety of wake-related activities. Everybody has the right to use the lake, but to do so in a responsible and also in a way to protect the environment of the lake. That was the first comment that we put forth here, trying to draw people's attention towards respecting people's use of the lake, but also to respect the environment. So those were the key things we try to put forth with this document. Our plans are, we have a kiosk down at the boat ramp. We plan to blow up the need-to-know information into a larger poster, along with doing the same thing with the map of the lake, so that people will see that as they bring forth for other people that come to use the lake. The last thing we will plan on do is sending out an email copy of this out to our email database, which we have about 450 people on that database. So if you have questions, I would entertain those now.
It's on screen. Any questions for Mr. Stephens?
Well, first of all, congratulations. Your initiative is just tremendous, your association. It's so nice that
Thank you.
grasped, this educational piece and put it together. Well, the rest of us obviously were doing other things. This is an important priority in my estimation. It's important because it's a cooperative action. It's very clear by what it says. It's not pinning it on anybody. It's saying, hey, it's all of our responsibility, and hey, that's just the way things go. I commend you guys. Is it possible, everyone likes to be a wordsmither. Is it possible for us to be able to direct any comments we might have to the administrator, who could send them to you? And it's up to you whether you use them or not.
I think if you have better wordsmithing ways to approach things, like I said, I was not a literary,
I'm not
I do
suggesting,
not have a literary degree, I have an engineering degree, so that was 40 years ago. So
if you wouldn't mind. Can we
if you
a
have
week
comments,
or something
yeah,
like
we held off on doing anything more with this. We worked with a person on Prior Lake in development of the maps, who also works with the Prior Lake Association. So we've shared the information with both the Prior Lake. I haven't heard back from Adam yet relative to where they're at with, like I said, I think they have some higher, more difficult challenges on the two Prior Lakes than what we have on Spring.
Be so nice if they use this as a template, as a starter for them.
For them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And each their own. Nice work.
Yep. So if you have comments, if you want to provide those to Joni, and we can work on the wordsmithing if you think there's better ways to present things.
Thank you.
Okay, I see in our agenda, we are being asked to vote to include our inclusion of the item that we have our organization listed. So that's what we're really approving.
Correct,
Is
President.
it something we can approve tonight and then still give comments of wordsmithing to district administrator, and she can incorporate or send them to Wes? Is that how we want to proceed? Joni, do you have any thoughts? I know you're looking at me like, what am I talking about? But I think we can vote on this inclusion and still provide comments, because we're not voting on the whole item. We're just voting to be included.
Yeah, President Loney, I would say the vote should be, if you're comfortable with it, how it is worded today, and that you'd be willing to put our name, the organization's name on the brochure, with the understanding that we could also provide some suggested edits for Spring Lakes Association's consideration. But if the wording of some of the wordsmith that we're thinking is going to drive whether we approve putting our organization's name on it or not, then we should vote down, I guess, or that would have to
Yeah.
influence your vote.
I think I hear what you're saying. Is there any wordsmithing with the paragraph that were included in this brochure? Is there anybody have any comments on that?
Christian, I'm sorry.
Manager Morkenberg?
Yes, so I just want to compliment you on putting this document together. I also realize that I think it's also important to get the document produced and handed out this summer. So therefore, there's some level of time constraint on it. The wording as it is, I would be fine with the wording as it is, but open to if we needed to make changes. But I would personally prefer if we could approve it today. For the Spring Lake Association, if you post this on your board and you post your map, one suggestion I had is to put maybe on the one where you look at the water levels, the depth of the lake, maybe put in the suggested lanes for the wakeboard use, recommended lanes. These are not rules, but recommended lanes. I mean, just so it's easy to see. And the other thing is, when you look at this document, it says everything, it's good, but most people wouldn't read it. So there may be a few pertinent statements that you could highlight in a separate document if there's some of these that you feel are very important. But overall, I think it's very good, and I would approve it as is. But
Have to approve it, and then,
If I may comment about the lake, in the process of putting this information together, we reviewed a number of different lake organizations that have done things.
Okay, I'm going to bring this back for board action, I think. First of all, thank you for your work in the association, a good job on putting this together. Our item on here is for us to approve the inclusion of the paragraph in this brochure. That's what's being asked of us, so. Are we looking for a motion to approve the inclusion of the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Organization contact information on the Spring Lake Association brochure? So it's just really that one paragraph. We're not endorsing anything else.
Yeah, so I move that we approve the concept of putting the watershed district contact information on there with the small caveat that on there it says website and it gives an email instead of, so change that to email.
Oh, yeah, the website is wrong, yeah. The website needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Okay, you made a motion to include basically, Ben, you're saying to
Yeah,
include that paragraph with that change of the website and Manager Tofinelli, just second that. Any more discussion on that inclusion of that paragraph on the Spring Lake Association brochure? Any more
Question.
discussion? Frank?
Does that preclude the opportunity to shoot some
Nope.
suggestions to the administrator? The association can throw them out, or?
We'll have a separate motion.
I think that would just be a,
fine.
We'll have a separate motion.
something that we
on-
could do in, outside of this motion.
Yeah. Okay, let's just vote on this motion first. So, motion's on the table here to approve the inclusion of that paragraph with the change as a website information on there. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carried. Now, if we want to do some wordsmithing edits, we need another motion, and I think we should have a timeline, how quickly you want to get, they want to get this out, I assume. Yeah, so you want to get this out.
Give us a short road.
How many
What do you
days?
think?
How many
10 days? A week.
Okay, you want to make a motion, Frank?
Sure. I move that the association, or excuse me, that the watershed provide within 10 days some suggestions that it might have to elaborate on certain points in the document.
Motion made, any second?
Second.
Second by Ben. Any discussion on the motion?
I think we're overstepping where we need to be on this. You can take, I was in a meeting today and someone talked executed versus entered into, and you're just slicing and dicing something that's been well-written, and maybe on the third place here where it says the, I think it should say that. I think we're wasting our time.
A week.
Yeah, I was going to make an amendment, no more than a week from today. Get the comments to District Administrator DC and then over to Wes as soon as possible, if there are any edits. Okay, do I need to make a friendly, somebody needs to second my friendly amendment? I went to a week.
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, second that. And you're okay with that, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're going to say any wordsmithing or any comments that we may have on the overall brochure. You need to get those over to District Administrator within a week. Any further discussion? Discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed. Motion carried 4-1. Thank you, Wes, though, for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Nice job.
And get those comments over to Joni as soon as you can, so they can get this. They want to get it on the, get it out there as soon as possible. Okay, the next item is the permit application for,
Can I go, I'm sorry,
oh,
one more item. Do you have any ideas on how we might help the Prior Lake Association to do the same? I mean, I don't want to be pushy, although that, okay. Sure. If there's anything we can do, let us know through the administrator.
I think the only thing that Joni and I talked about doing is, I think for next year, some sort of an educational brochure, maybe at the same sort of time, hard copy it.
Broaden it out.
We also utilize the boat inspectors to pass out stuff and boat inspections.
Sure.
I mean, these are all ideas that Joni and I can flesh out.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm
That's-
sorry.
that's in the future, yep. Okay, thank you again. The next item is 4.3. It is the permit application number 23.02, Fish Point Road Phase 3, City of Prior Lake. And really, we've done Phase 1 and 2. This is just the existing road right-of-way Fish Point from Omega Trail to the Trunk Highway 13. It's a little segment, so I don't know who's taking this.
President Loney and managers. Once again, yes, in April, the Board of Managers approved the City of Prior Lake permit application for Phase 2 of the Fish Point Road project. A small segment of the road up near Trunk Highway 13, which is being indicated right here with the cursor, was not included in Phase 2 as the city was still working through some roadway design issues with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So this permit application really covers just that small segment that was previously excluded from segment 2. During the review of the application, it was not clear to the district engineer whether stormwater treatment volume associated with this current application was already included in the MOA that the Water District entered into with the City of Prior Lake regarding to give them, for them to go enter into a deficit position with their stormwater volume. So with that condition on our approval, along with staff has also provided some other more standard conditions that the permit application approval should be contingent upon, which are once again outlined in the staff report. So kind of 3 options for action today. The Board of Managers can approve the application for Phase 3, subject to the conditions noted in the permit application and the staff review comments. The board could table the item, extend the application until further specified date, and provide the applicant with direction on the issues that have been discussed. Or 3, deny the application stating the reason for denial. So staff recommends option 1, that the board approve the permit application for Phase 3, subject to the conditions noted in the permit application and staff review comments.
Okay, do I have a motion as what staff recommends?
So moved.
Motion by Manager Boyles.
Second.
Second by Manager Burnett. Now we can have discussion. I would just like to make the comment, I think the road work is already in place, is working on it already. They're already doing the work already, I believe.
The city is working on Phase 2.
Yeah,
Phase 3 has
they
not.
haven't started phase.
They have
yet?
not started Phase 3. They cannot start Phase 3 until we issue the permit.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to approve Phase 3, subject to the permit application and staff review comments. Any more discussion on that? I don't see or hear any, so all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried 5-0. All right. Moving on to 4.4, I believe. Let me double check my notes here. And this is to rescind the COVID-19 safety plan. Administrator Gacy, you want to rescind something, huh?
I do. Managers, in response to the pandemic and direction from the state of Minnesota, Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District had adopted a COVID-19 safety plan in February of 2022. And the plan really followed best practices and guidance provided by the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health. Subsequent to the plan adoption, both the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health have updated their COVID-19 guidance to reflect the current best practices. And also, because the emergency has been lifted, safety plans are no longer required by governmental entities. Staff believes, though, that COVID-19 still is an illness that can impact the district staff and operations, but we feel now that it would be best to reflect district policies regarding COVID-19 in our personnel manual versus having a standalone policy document. And one way to consider that is to relate, once again, reference best practices in our personnel manual put forward by CDC and the Minnesota or the Minnesota Department of Health as it relates to workplace safety protocols in relation to COVID-19. So staff is recommending that the Board of Managers actually rescind the district's COVID-19 safety plan and direct the district and direct the district administrator to incorporate COVID-19 workplace safety practices into an updated personnel policy for the manager's review and adoption.
So moved.
A motion made by Manager Boyle, second by Manager Tofinelli. Any discussion on this item? Board members? Okay, and I think it's a good idea, Joni, to do what you're doing, so. And it's a updated personnel policy. You're gonna have a lot of work to do, because we keep talking about all these updates. So, one of these days, we'll get there. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Carried 5-0. Okay, so now we're up to the treasurer's report, and Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, thank you. In general, I will say that our funds are used well and in steady state. We are on solid footing and staying within budget. We received our first levy payment, as you can see on the cash flow chart. Nothing is out of alignment for the first part of the year, but as you know, as we discussed last year, traditionally you have more expenses in the second part of the year, where we start paying many of our subcontractors. Emily's making good progress, and we hope to spend more money on the big projects, and once they come, we're going to see a significant decrease in our funding.
Is that ominous?
We forget to pay our bill.
Rheostat, wow.
Was that a sign? Emily, those projects aren't
All the computers went out, the light went out. Is there a storm?
It's a more laid-back watershed. Yeah, there you go.
You probably knew all about
Thank you.
I did that telekinetically, or whatever I did.
Yes, so we look forward to that. And we are, as you know, today we reviewed our project planning for 2024. We are in the middle of that and working with the CAC for feedback as well. Our 4M fund is going well so far. And like we have a security that matured, and we reinvested that in the incremental approach that we are doing. So we enjoy working with 4M to make sure that the funds are invested safely and correctly. And I think that's about it, what I have to say. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions on the treasurer's report? Okay. Looking good.
Thank you.
Looking good. Okay, now we're up to the 6.0 consent agenda. And on the consent agenda, we have meeting minutes of June 11th of the board workshop, meeting minutes for the June 11th board meeting, claims list and visa expenditure summary, conservation easement amendment, and Jeffers Lodge development agreement. That's on our consent. Anybody want to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Manager Tofinelli to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, I'll give it to Manager Morkenberg. Okay, motion made and seconded. There is no discussion on consent. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's approved 5-0. Okay, I think we're at Item 7.0, which is our upcoming meeting and event schedule. We have a CAC meeting on Thursday, July 27th at 6 PM in the Prior Lake City Hall Wagon Bridge Conference Room. Our next meeting for the Board of Managers, the workshop, is on Tuesday, August 8th at 4 PM, and then on August 8th at 6 PM is our Board of Managers regular meeting. With that, I look for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Motion made by Manager Markenberg, second by Manager Tofinelli. All in favor, say aye. 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 We are adjourned at 7:25. Thank you, everybody.